campaign, but we also were learning new details this morning about the search of former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago Golf Club carried out by federal agents last year after a less redacted version of the search warrant affidavit was made public yesterday. The newly public portions of that document reveal the federal agents investigating Trump's connection to classified materials told the judge who signed the search warrant they were concerned the location of some of the documents was unknown. The affidavit indicates Justice Department officials became concerned after viewing security camera footage from Mar-a-Lago that they obtained from Trump's company. The affidavit reveals the video showed a Trump employee, since identified as aide and former White House valet Walt Nauta, moving boxes out of a storage area where Trump and his lawyers previously had acknowledged keeping classified documents. Those same videos were referred to in the criminal indictment filed against Trump and Nauta last month. The indictment also stated documents had been stored at a number of locations, including Trump's office, residence, a ballroom stage, and now infamously inside a bathroom. The federal judge in Florida who signed off on the August search warrant, Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart, ordered the additional information from that affidavit be made public yesterday. But he denied a request by media organizations, including NBC News, that the entire affidavit be unsealed. So, Danny, this is a search warrant that we had seen, but it was heavily redacted. Now we get a little bit of a look inside of it because of this ruling from the judge. As you look through it, what's new to you beside the fact that we have this video footage of Walt Nauta moving documents out of the storage facility, which is the place Trump and his aides had said it was all in there, it was all secure. We now know otherwise.
Well, that fleshes out the indictment for us because it tells us now what we didn't know when the document was sealed, at least partially sealed or redacted, I should say, that in fact Walt Nauta specifically may have been moving documents, and there was this concern that we think we know, at least from what we've been told, where these documents are, and they're not there. We think there are additional documents. We've seen them on video, and that makes us better understand this indictment, which alleges that Trump may have misled his attorneys. His attorneys took that information and gave it to federal investigators. And by the way, for me, that has been the vindicating force the entire time for attorneys in general, which is the idea that there was a suggestion during this investigation that Trump's attorneys may have been complicit in hiding these documents. Now, maybe as a lawyer, that concerned me, and I hoped and prayed that that was not the case. It seems that it was not the case. It seems that from the indictment, that Trump misled his attorneys. His attorneys took that information and gave it to federal investigators. And I can tell you, as a lawyer, every defense attorney in America can tell you a story of being led down a path by their clients. It happens all the time. And unfortunately, sometimes attorneys take that information and give it to federal investigators or law enforcement or something else. So this is something that I think we knew, that now that this has been unredacted, now we can see that the information that was concealed may have been by Trump and by Walt Nauta, who was probably just carrying out orders by Trump or someone close to him.
And John, Walt Nauta will be arraigned today if he can come up with a lawyer. This is the third attempt at an arraignment. Still hasn't been able to find a lawyer. We will see, but clearly he is central to this case.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to go with you, Danny, is this idea. As of last night, he still had not retained, it appears, a lawyer who could represent him in a Florida courtroom. This would appear to be a stall tactic, which we've all sort of anticipated Trump and his team would utilize. So what's your sense of this? Like, is there anything that can be done to compel him to show up and to make this arraignment happen? And what's your just overarching sense of the timeline of this case? We know Jack Smith's the one who said, hey, let's move from August to December, but they're setting clear signals. We don't want to be delayed any further than December.
A couple things here. Defendants will often use the hiring an attorney as a ploy to delay. It works only to a point. At some point, for example, at an arraignment, a judge might just say, look, have the public defender stand in for you. We need to move this case along. The arraignment, at least, it's substantively important, but practically speaking, virtually any attorney can stand in. And that includes maybe even a public defender. Now, if I'm a federal judge in this case, I would be very concerned about just forcing a public defender on this high-profile defendant. But believe me, in state court, this happens all the time. Judges will not countenance these maneuvers if a defendant is trying to delay. But On a larger point, I've been saying this since the beginning. Watch Walt Nauta in this case. Yes, it may be true that he has expressed no interest in cooperating with federal investigators or federal prosecutors, but as anyone who has prosecuted these kinds of sprawling white-collar type cases will tell you, that decision may change over time. As this case winds on and as the fatigue sets in and Walt Nauta gets a better idea of what he's facing, he may change his mind about cooperation and look no further than this already disparate treatment. If it's true that Trump is footing, say, the legal bills or supporting him in other ways, already by the arraignment, Walt Nauta is in a different position. Trump's already been arraigned. Walt Nauta has yet to be arraigned because he doesn't yet have an attorney. Now, is Walt Nauta and is Donald Trump, are they fine with that? Is that part of the plan? Is this no big deal? Maybe. But Walt Nauta might start thinking, hey, wait a minute. The big guy, he had a lawyer at the arraignment. He's all covered. I haven't even been arraigned yet because I don't have a lawyer. And maybe he's fine with that. Okay, that's part of the plan. We're still a team. We're still a joint defense agreement. We're still together, aligned in this case. But what happens down the line when Walt Nauta starts seeing other disparate treatment, other broken promises where Trump said, we're going to be together the entire way on this, and now maybe a year from now, when I still think this case will be going, there's absolutely no way this case is going to trial in this calendar year. But as the months wind on, will Walt Nauta start thinking, hey, this isn't the together team that I thought we were in from the beginning. Maybe I ought to start thinking about cooperation.
And Caddy, Walt Nauta still is out there staffing Donald Trump, by the way. They're still side by side going to events and doing things together, even as they've been instructed not to speak about this case. We'll leave it to our audience to decide if Donald Trump will exercise that restraint.
I know. I thought of that too. It's pretty surreal, isn't it? The two are spending all of that time close together, and you know what it's like having a body man. They really are close. Well, I've never had a body man, but you've seen presidents with them. You know how close they are. And it's kind of hard to believe they never talk about this case in those private moments, perhaps going around the golf course or something. But Danny, something that you just briefly touched on earlier, and that's, so there's Walt, and is there anybody else? And I know there's only 2 people who have been indicted, but just reading through that last bit that's been made public from the search warrant, having just spent, a kind of very sweaty morning moving a child out of dorm rooms, moving 3 or 4 boxes, 50 boxes get moved out and 25 boxes get moved back in again. Walt's doing all of that by himself. I mean, that sort of stretches credulity, because we saw the pictures of those boxes just a second ago. We can put them back up again. That's what it looks like, 50 boxes. It's an awful lot. And it's kind of, I was just wondering if there's, somebody else must know something about what was happening.
Yes, they probably do, but I think it's safe to assume that Walt Nauta may be the only defendant we see charged with Trump. And here are my reasons for saying that. Number one, this is a long, sprawling investigation, and I have to believe that when federal prosecutors indicted this case, they believed they knew everything they had to know about every defendant they wanted to charge, because this is arguably the most important federal defendant in the history of American prosecution. So you better believe that when that indictment dropped, they knew and had a document to back up every single paragraph in that indictment. So it would surprise me if they decided to add a new defendant through a superseding indictment. But beyond that, to answer your question specifically, yes, I think there were additional people who may have known more about the boxes. But those people, when they got a phone call or a letter from federal prosecutors, probably raced in to tell them everything that they knew. And that's often the case in federal investigations. There probably are additional people who may have known more than they should have, or may have been somewhat complicit, but likely as not, they cooperated with federal investigators, and the government decided not to charge them. But then, of course, you're also going to have people who may have just been following orders. Hey, we need some of these boxes moved. They didn't look inside the boxes. They moved them around. So you're going to have a lot of people who are just minions with no actual knowledge of what they were doing. But are there people in that gray area? Absolutely. I would expect that there are. But those may be people who, as I said, rushed in, talked to federal investigators, and federal investigators and prosecutors exercised their discretion and probably just chose not to prosecute.
Eddie, sometimes you just have to take a step back and remind yourself about the volume of evidence in this case against Donald Trump. You've got photographs of the documents. You've got now video footage of Walt Nauta moving the documents. I'm remembering the quote from Bill Barr several weeks ago where he said, if half of what they put in this indictment is true, Donald Trump is toast.
Right.
That's his former attorney general.
If we weren't in bizarro world, we'd say he did the rights, right? I mean, it just seems pretty straightforward. Danny, you said something as you were talking that struck me. You said with a high level of confidence that this was not going to happen in this calendar year.
No way. There's no way, and I'll tell you why.
Fascinating.
Yeah, the Speedy Trial Act requires that starting at indictment, the clock begins and all cases must be brought to trial within 70 days. Now, I add about 11 footnotes of exceptions to that rule in just a standard federal case. For example, if the defense starts filing motions, dispositive motions, motions to throw a case out, the judge has to decide those motions. They have to be briefed. That could add time to that could waive essentially the Speedy Trial Act. So that will add time to the case. In addition, you have security issues with putting a trial together. You're probably going to have to clear the entire courthouse. Everything moves glacially in whether it's federal court or state court. Federal court admittedly moves a lot faster than state court. It's probably a safe bet that Trump's federal case will come to trial before his New York case. And that's because simply the New York courts are much more clogged. They take longer to get to trial, but in federal court, they move very quickly. That being said, this is a complex, sprawling case. Walt Nauta hasn't even been arraigned yet, just to give you an idea. So all the best laid plans, even in federal court where they're much more efficient, they simply don't pan out because unexpected things happen. For example, how many weeks has it been and Walt Nauta has not yet been arraigned? And that's something that's supposed to happen right away. So to give you that as just an example, Eddie, that's something that's supposed to happen immediately after the indictment comes out. And it hasn't happened for one of the co-defendants. So the expectation that this case would be tried in this calendar year, it's just not going to happen. There's no way it can't happen. We haven't even started the dispositive motions, and those are coming. Believe me, Donald Trump's team is going to file any number of motions to throw this case out entirely. So once those begin, that'll maybe give us a better idea, but it's not happening in this calendar year. Save the tape. Maybe don't save the tape, but save the tape.